I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even if nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me.
Hey everyone, are you rad for Christ? Fired up for Jesus? Welcome back to another episode of Radical Christianity, the talk show that highlights God in action. I am Drew, your host, and it is a blessing to have you join us today. So, I have some great news for you guys. The election season is over! Woo! No more junk mail, no more ads, no more smear campaigns to interrupt our daily lives. Seems like we can move on, right? Well, apparently there are a lot of people who are pretty worked up about these election results, and some women have even gone so far as to shave their heads, while others are threatening to leave the country. Others have taken it even further. According to one former pastor, some youth are deconstructing their Christian faith in order to distance themselves from Donald Trump and the evangelical party. Talk about separation of church and state, right? I mean, who do they think he is? Jesus Christ? Sorry to break it to you, there is no such thing as Orange Jesus. Meanwhile, one evangelical group in Ireland expressed concern over youth in the country finding it much more difficult now to come out as an evangelical Christian in school than it is to come out as LGBT. Maybe it has something to do with all the rainbows in Ireland. I don't know. And that's with a leprechaun as their president. No, I'm kidding. Speaking of, what's the leprechaun's favorite band? Well, Green Day, of course. But never fear, these are just some people's opinions. Just this last month in Dublin, Ireland, around 12,000 people showed up for the first ever March for Jesus. Can I get an amen on that? All right, believers from all over the country joined together to march through town celebrating affirming the Christian identity of the nation, which stretches back to the 5th century when missionary St. Patrick first arrived. And that is news worth celebrating. Can I get an amen? Okay, one more joke for you. Why did the leprechaun cross the road? Well, because the light turned green. Duh. Okay, everyone, I hope we had you doubling over with laughter today. So tell me, you rad for Christ? Fired up for Jesus? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this guest coming up is somebody who's been here before. He's got a lot to say. He's a really good dude. He's a good friend of mine. I'm really glad he's here. Let's have a huge warm welcome for Eric Rollins. Woo! Eric, how are you doing, man? Great to see you, man. Have a seat.
It's good to be back.
Yeah. This is going to be fun.
I hope so.
So welcome back to Radical Christianity. Those who don't remember, Eric's a returning guest and a friend of mine.
I hope so.
So you be nice to him. No nasty comments, please.
Yeah, there's free speech. Just try to be polite, but beyond that, say what you got to say.
Say what you got to say. Yeah. So let's for the people who are not up to date, let's share with them your talk show, what it's about, and what you do.
Okay, for fun, because I make zero money, I have a show called The Constitutionalist. So I focus on educating people about the Constitution. I am generally on the conservative side of that. I often have guests on. I've had 2 different friends of yours on multiple times. Mm-hmm. David Tongipa, rather impressed with David, and Nick, who's a very smart guy. So local, I focus a lot on local, trying to get people to essentially reimagine their civics or find them again. The idea that we should be engaged citizens is incredibly important to me. Now, that means that sometimes people aren't going to agree with me, but I want people to go out, and we have this incredible opportunity and freedom here to be blessed in this nation. And so I want them to go out and take the responsibility part of our freedom, because we're in a representative republic. That, to me, means it's not mob rule. It means that we have to have morality, which for me comes from Christianity, and that we need to have a civic responsibility, have a civic society or civil society, so that we can engage and work out, kind of where we stand. Religion and politics became the third rail, and we weren't supposed to talk about them. But how do you resolve things if you don't talk about them? We just become more divided.
Well, obviously, we are supposed to talk about them, just not in polite company.
That's a funny way to put that.
You know what I mean?
I like that.
That's what my grandma always said. You don't talk about religious or politics in polite company. Yeah.
Yeah, my grandma said don't speak about it at all.
Well,
And
that's a short
I'm
way.
somehow one of her favorites, and yet I don't listen whatsoever.
Well, anyway, I always approach my politics through not just a Christian lens, but what I would consider a lens of true fairness, which we've discussed a little bit, so you kind of know how I think on it. So, I kind of like to make sure that, this discussion, as we kick around all kinds of crazy elements, that we think about it through the how it applies to the Christian community, and the Christian should approach it this way, and why, not just because you think so, or it's cultural, or tribal, or someone told you to, or your pastor said to, or you know what I mean?
No, I think that you should look at the set of values if you're a Christian. You've got biblical values. How do those apply to issues? Now, you should have a discussion, because I would imagine that your pastor would have some insight, we would hope. But so many Christians don't vote. I believe they have an obligation to vote. I've had friends say, well, God will decide anyway. Well, God's going to decide no matter what. But we were given free will and a set of rules to try to create a better life for not just ourselves, but our communities. And so I think that part of that responsibility, especially if you're Christian, is to go out and vote.
Yeah, I would say
to become informed.
I would
also.
say that most Christians have obviously the first thing that I would say that most Christians suffer is low information. Like, there's not, like you said, civics in school is super important. If you don't get a good civics education in school, you don't even know how to start to investigate something like what a law says and what its possible repercussions are, and you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's a major investigation. It's a lot of work, and people don't want to put the work in. A lot of people refuse.
Don't.
Yeah.
We've got a 30-second society where everything's easy because we're spoiled.
So they'll just take the word of somebody who has impressed them in some kind of way. You know what I mean?
I get that a lot. I have a lot of people just before this election that said, well, how would you vote on this? And I want them to ask me questions, as opposed to almost always they want me to just tell them what to do.
I know exactly. I was, after I got asked about 10 times, I almost put together a mailer, you know what I mean? Like, just email people when they asked, here's how I'm voting. You know what I mean?
I actually did that. But I would prefer to have a conversation. Here's why I made the choice between these two candidates. Here's the things that were important to me. Here's the things they've said to me, and whether what they say, their words and actions meet. We have to make a choice every time we see somebody through body language. Are their words and their actions meeting? Well, we need to be interrogating
there's more
candidates
than that.
just like
there's
that.
more than that too. Like, I'm not going to drop any names right now, because if I say something negative, I'm not going to try and associate that to a person. But there is an office where that was up this year, where there was two people running for it that both kind of took, like, we're Christian and this is how we're approaching it. One of them was actually focused on the job and what the jobs offered and what it meant to be a Christian when trying to make those decisions as a job, right? And the other one was focused, everything that came out of their mouth was hard right national politics for a local political position that had nothing to do with anything he was talking about.
I can guess who that is.
You probably can.
I probably don't need to go there, but I can guess.
We don't need to cover that detail, because I don't want to upset anybody. But because here's the thing is, like, I am a very understanding, open kind of person, right? So, like, even if I totally disagree with you entirely, like Ted and I, we'll butt heads.
Ted loves to butt heads.
We're both, like, literally, we're both, like...
So this is Ted Laurent. He's been on your show before.
He's been on the show twice. Yeah, they know who he is.
And Ted's a personal friend, but Ted likes to butt heads about certain things.
Right. And
he's a hammer.
And
he's not a finesse guy. He's a hammer.
Right. And
smart guy though.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. He's a smart guy. And sometimes I'm like, where did you get that detail from? You know what I mean? But that's because I'm more strict on, like actually looking at it from a lens first, through Jesus, and then, you know what I mean? How is this fairness? You know what I mean? And like that approach is, his approach is a little different. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, although it's still, these elements are very important to him. It's just that we approach it a little different. So there's some things that, we will just like never agree on. You know what I mean? But we're friends. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And we can sit down and we can have disagreements and still be completely friends afterwards. You know what I mean? So. No,
I had some interesting discussions with some people that are friends that are significantly more liberal than me, and we had a great discussion. They got slightly pushed out of shape about a couple things, and I'm laughing. I'm like, look. And then when they saw me afterwards, after the results of the election, they're like, aren't you going to rub it in? I'm like, what would be the point in that? We're friends. Mm-hmm. I said, I can come up with something if you want me to, if that's what you're asking for, but it's really not my style to rub it in somebody's face.
Right.
I have what I believe in. I go out, I work for it. I'm on the Republican Central Committee here in Fresno County. I lead a group called Constitutionalists for California, the Clovis chapter. I'm very much dedicated to what I believe, but I get that's not what everybody believes.
What's crazy is that you, me, and Ted are all conservative Republicans, and still very different from each other. Yes. Still very different from each other.
I think you have the most libertarian leanings of the three of us.
Well, yes.
I'm somewhere in between.
I'm definitely strong libertarian. Don't get that confused with liberal. Let's not confuse our terms.
No. Yeah. Though I don't have huge problems with traditional liberals because they believe in free speech. Modern, the term is shifted. The woke left, I have big problems with.
Conservatives believe in free speech too, though. That's a.
Yes, they do, but the woke left does not, and that is the element that is controlling one party right now. Now, I hope that shifts because we will have a better country if they find a little more tolerance.
Well, I think wokeism has a lot to do with how the presidential election went, because one side fully embraced it and they got tanked. Mm-hmm. So, and it's like wokeism seems to be a very, very, very small, just loud, community of people who are idealists that don't realize or choose to believe that there's consequences to every decision. Mm-hmm. So like if you think, oh, this is so great, okay, but what does that mean over here? You know what I mean? Well, it's like one person's idea of fairness, if it takes away from somebody else, it's not fair. You know what I mean? If like, say, for instance, we talk about religious values, right? So I have no qualms for this. If I piss anybody off, too bad. I have a real hard time with classrooms displaying the rainbow flag, but we can't have a cross on the wall.
No, there's a lack of balance there.
Yeah, I see it as
even
though technically the wokeism of the LGBTQ2S plus whatever name they have,
whatever it is today,
right? Like I believe they have every right to love who they want to love. They have every right to be who they want to be, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else and the children are protected from it.
Yes, my biggest issues are that minors are involved.
Right. And so when that goes into a classroom, I still see that even though that is not technically a religion, it is still a cultural type of lifestyle thing.
But it has all the elements of religion.
It does. It really does. I mean, it basically is a religion to some degree. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But it's not a deity worship kind of thing. You know what I mean? In some ways, it's an anti-deity worship kind of thing, but you know what I mean, in some ways. But don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying in some ways it resembles that. But the issue being is that they're stopping, groups from, communicating on campuses, from outreach, from, you know what I mean, like reading the Bible in class, teaching the Bible.
That happened in Clovis. There was a Bible study group, and because they wanted to bring in a Satan group, the school board of Clovis decided that they would push that to after hours and not allow them access during regular school hours. And that was their way to keep out the Satan group. You know,
Well,
I'm a
it's-
little torn on, that's just creepy to me that there's a Satan club, because that means that you're acknowledging that there's a greater power, but that greater power is to do bad. Yikes.
Well,
I understand they have the right, but it's still creepy.
Yeah, but it's
And
not even that their greater thing is to do bad. Actually, most of those Satan clubs are just to undermine the others. You know what I mean? They don't even like have their own like agenda other than to tear down the other faiths, specifically Christianity in most cases. The challenge that I see in there is that we do have to respect other faiths, you know, if we want to have fairness for our own. Right, so if we're going to have Christian clubs and that kind of stuff, we got to allow the other faiths. We got to allow, you know, the Punjabi clubs, the ones that focus on the avatars of, you know, of.
well, it wouldn't be Punjabi because that's a region as opposed to a religion.
You're
It
right.
would be Sikh or
be-
Muslim or
you are
almost
correct.
everybody that's in the Punjab region is one of three religions.
The word that I wanted didn't come out, so
Yeah.
that was the one that came out. It's actually, what is it? It is. It's not Sikh. It's from that region.
Okay, so there's Sikhs, Muslims, and the Jains are farther south.
The one that has all the avatars.
The Hindus.
Hindu. That's where I was going to say. We'd have to have a Hindu club for each avatar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We would. You know what I mean? We and the thing is like.
And yet, if you speak to a Hindu, they say they have one God with many aspects.
Well, it depends on which Hindu you speak to.
That is true, because that is probably about the most diverse religion there is.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's one of the largest. You know, but so I'm just saying that if we want the right to do something, you know what I mean, not just the desire or whatever. If we want it to be like, you know, legally allowed to, you know, to have things taught in class, you know what I mean, out of the Bible or whatever. Then we have to actually understand that there are other religions that have to be taught also, if they have the same kind of historical significance or whatever. And I'm not saying teach Christianity in class as, hey,
No, but
you know what I mean?
there might be some lessons from pretty much every major religion that would be useful.
Well, I remember
in creating a lesson and creating a way to look at.
A long time ago, I remember they would be okay with referencing cultural significance elements out of specific religions. That's how come I know about the avatars. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's because it was something that we learned about in school. We didn't like, hey, this is how you pray, this is how you do it. They didn't cover anything like that, obviously. But they were saying who this person is, what it is. This is the one that has the 6 arms. This is the one that, you know what I mean, that does with dreams. This is, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. It was like a class. And it was actually part of the cultural classes that followed up with art, you know what I mean, and that kind of stuff. And these were all like, you know, so you know the people in your world that you share your world with. You know what I mean?
Well, I do want to tackle something that people think religion, a separation of church and state, from an original intent. They seem to think of it as, okay, that means there's no religion and it's to protect the government. No, it was to protect religion from tyranny of the state.
Well, it was also to protect the freedom of religion. You know what I mean? So if the state, if we had a state endorsed religion, you know what I mean, then it would become something.
Well,
that
it would be tyrannical
Right.
on all other even other branches of Christianity.
right. It would be abused, no matter what, in some way, shape, or form. It'd be almost impossible to not abuse it.
Right.
So I am all in favor of that separation of church and state. I think, we've talked. I actually think about that. I think about my faith first. And then when it comes to like voting things, I'm like, okay, well, this is my faith, but I got to respect their faith too. So when I approach it, I separate.
As long as I don't have to cross certain lines of my faith, sure.
Right. Well,
Because there will be some instances where what their faith is diametrically opposed to what mine says. I'm going to go with my faith first,
as
opposed to the idea of fairness.
If my faith prevents me from voting for either candidate, I'm going to write someone in.
That's fair.
It's because of my faith element. You know what I
I
mean?
have done that.
Because the whole lesser of two evils thing, you're still picking an evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I have decided that nothing politically is worth me picking an evil.
It depends on the level of damage. I think that
My one vote.
But everybody has has some evil within them. We all sin. Thus, I want to make the best choice. If I think it's beyond a certain level, then I've written in candidates.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So.
But I have to evaluate it. It's a little more complicated than that.
If we're looking at two people who are good people and the choice is minimal, right? Then it's not really, you're not choosing between the lesser of two evils.
No,
at
it's
that
not.
Point. You know what I mean?
But very frequently, the two parties are diametrically opposed. They represent completely different things.
Sometimes
and our two-party system does that.
Sometimes they're very, very close. It's just that one's a little dirtier than the other one. You know.
That is true.
You know.
There's been Republicans I refuse to vote for because I know they're dirty.
Yeah. I am also on that, which bothers me. You know, and then there's other people that have been run for election that I can just see as dangerous. Like if they were given power, that they were just dangerous, and I cannot bring myself. In fact, that actually caused one time I was so afraid. I'm not gonna drop any names. One time I was so afraid by one person who was up for office that person was just so out there and uneducated and just wrong for the job that they were up for. That it frightened me so much that I actually voted for the other side. And I don't usually do that. I don't vote against somebody. I only vote for somebody. You know what I mean? But I actually voted against somebody in that particular election.
I've never been in that situation.
Yeah, I have. And it was weird.
I've always voted for somebody, or if neither were acceptable, I wrote somebody in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Now, I could see where that's possible. I
I
haven't come across it.
I have pretty much nominated Mickey Mouse for almost every role at one point. No, it's my favorite write-in. I love Disneyland.
I like Mickey, but I don't know that he would be my first choice. I'm a little more twisted than that, and I would like somebody with a little more energy, like Rocky the Squirrel.
Rocky.
From Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah. He's okay. He's all right. He's smart.
Well, he's smart, and he's always got some sort of twisted moral to the story.
Yeah.
So.
And he's smart enough to have Bullwinkle with him to take all the brunts and get all the blame.
Yes. I think we all need a Bullwinkle at some point.
Yeah, except those of us who have to be the Bullwinkle.
Yeah, I've been both.
So normally we don't talk much politics on the show, and we're not like talking.
Well, and
much
we're talking about them in a very general way. I'm purposely not going hardline,
right?
Because I want to have a real discussion.
Because this is a show about Christianity and
right.
faith, and what we really want to do is we want to make sure we're talking about how Christians should approach their politics without telling them how to think, which is weird.
Well, I don't think you want to tell people how to think. I think
they tell it to media.
Well, I mean, we do have this book that you could read that would give us lots of advice on maybe how to think on a variety of issues.
Yes,
that should inspire you to act.
But then you are also by again, we're talking about the book. We're talking about the Bible, in case you guys haven't picked up on that, as a book to read, and then as how we should act. But the downside to that is, again, there's a lot of people out there that are not avid Bible readers, that are not avid Bible educated, so they may not understand what they're reading and the context in which they're reading it. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of low information, low education. You know what I mean? Emotional motivation going on in politics. That makes
will always be the case.
And the more that we dumb down society and fire them up emotionally, the more dangerous outcome it could have.
I think that's part of why our founding fathers were brilliant in setting up a representative republic. You know, the Senate is not decided in a proportional, truly democracy way. It's 2 for every state, which doesn't match up with the population.
Yeah, well, so I would say then the forefathers would be spinning around in their graves when they learn about gerrymandering. Because
Yes.
that completely undermines exactly what you just said. By being able to pick your voters, you know what I mean? You more or less create a way to
Fixed
separate
system.
Yeah, and it happens on both sides. And what it does is it pushes the ends further and further away, and the people in the middle, where most of us are, get phased out because because the primaries,
I agree that gerrymandering is a problem, but I still think that how they did that, because you would not have the minority. All those middle flyover states is what they call them. They would be ignored. So they found a way for them to get representation in the Senate. I think the same idea with the Electoral College.
Well,
that
so the Senate initially was a government post, was a governor post.
Yes, but they fixed that.
Yeah. And I think the states could still do that if they wanted to.
I think it depends on the state. Some of them can appoint.
Well, no, but the state, if it decides to, they can still do that. If it decides to, they just don't currently, I don't think.
I thought they changed that at a national level.
I don't think it's a national. Hey, if you know, send us a message so that we can listen to what you have to say. But I honestly don't know. But I do know that it was one at one point, and then because the states are they are their own entity when it comes to how voting happens. All that kind of stuff is all a statewide.
Outside of federal
thing.
elections,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, even the national election, they still get to choose. That's why we have the Electoral College.
Yes, and some states have decided that whatever the popular vote is within that state, that's who it goes to. Some states have decided that no, they're not obligated, and they can kind of do whatever they want, regardless of how their people vote.
And that's more or less.
But that's federalism.
Yeah,
that's the idea of states' rights. Federalism essentially is a short way of saying states' rights.
Yeah.
But I think the Electoral College is a good idea because true democracies, I believe, lead towards tyranny of the majority.
Well, I think,
and I think we have some of that anyway with gerrymandering.
I think that the Electoral College is a good thing. I think that it needs to be reevaluated because of some of the states have too much representation, and some of them don't have enough. You know what I mean?
Well, but they determine that by every 10 years there's a census, and they count illegal aliens, by the way.
I know. They count human beings.
They count human beings. I have a problem with that because those people can't legally vote in a federal election.
So neither can children, but they count them too.
Children are here legally.
Yes, but they can't vote.
In almost all cases.
But they can't vote. So if we can vote based on children numbers, then it's just human bodies. I get the logic. I mean, it's like, it's just, that's the logic. I'm not trying to say what's right, what's wrong. I'm just saying that.
See, I think it's wrong if somebody's not here legally. If they're here legally, count them. If they're not here legally, I have a problem with that.
If they're here and they live here, this is where they are living, legally or illegally, and they're paying sales tax and the things that go on in this government affect them, they're still a body here, whether they're legal or illegal. And I mean, we can pull hairs on that, but I mean, as a Christian, my Christian charity goes out to any human being, whether they're legal or illegal. So I think
yes, but you have a priority. You're supposed to take care of your family first, right? The people in your church, people in your town.
I don't know. The Bible doesn't go that way. The Bible goes to those who need the most, are usually the ones we're supposed to focus on.
I remember, and I'm not great at quoting, but I remember you're supposed to take care of your family first so that you can then take care of.
That is,
and I will have to look that up.
Yeah,
I am not great at quoting scripture.
There's a little making sure that you're able to serve. You know what I mean? Like make sure you don't starve yourself to death so that you can serve, kind of thing. But most of the disciples left their family behind. You know what I mean? They weren't like, okay, well, I'm following God. Whatever happens to you happens. You know what I mean? And like Peter did bring his wife along eventually, but You know, I mean, it wasn't 100% across the board every case. You know, it's like there's a lot of, I mean, we can get into some crazy deep discussions on that kind of stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of things that the way that the people looked at the world back at a different time than we look at now changes the way that we interpret the Bible. You know what I mean? So it's, you know, there's a whole mess there. But where I was making my point was that as a Christian, as somebody who has to think through the lens of Christian charity, right? A body is a body is a body. Like if a person's starving on the street, I'm not going to say, well, are you a citizen before I give you a sandwich? You know what I mean? I'm going
to look at, is there somebody that I should be helping first?
Well,
so for me, that's my first connection. It's not necessarily a stranger.
If I have one sandwich and there's two people, one's a citizen and one's not a citizen, I'm cutting the sandwich in half.
See, I'm not. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I can let either of them starve.
I've often given money to people but I'm always giving the sandwiches better than giving money. And I've given money and I typically regret that.
Yeah.
Because who knows what the money's going to go for.
Right.
As opposed to giving them food, you know exactly.
Yeah. I wait till the Spirit moves me to give money. If the Spirit moves me, then I don't second guess it. You know, and if the Spirit's not moving me, the money is not coming out. Simple as that. As far as cash.
That's a good way to look at that.
Yeah.
There have been times when I was younger where I kind of was guilted into it.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong way to look at it.
Well, you know,
but at that point in my life, I was not particularly Christian.
And if they catch me, like in a parking lot or whatever, if they want that money, they got to pray with me. so you know, it's like
that's a good way. I'll have to remember.
I'd be like, you want some money? Well, can I pray with you? Let's see what God says about this. If God wants me to give you some money, you know, usually they're like, no, forget it. You know, I've had that happen. I'm like, all right, well then apparently you don't really need that money. If you're starving for money and starving for food, you're going to put yourself through a prayer, even if you don't believe.
Yeah, so. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So anyway,
well, my life has definitely changed as I've become more and more of a believer. As I've become in my flawed walk, but my walk towards. I want to say, well, if you're truly walking with God, you're walking closer to perfection. I think that's a fair way to put that.
Well,
not necessarily at God's level,
yeah,
but
I would.
But you're sinning less.
You're trying better. You're trying to get your goal is in the direction of perfection.
Yes, I don't know that it can achieve. I doubt. Maybe you can achieve it, but I know I can't.
I would not even claim to be able to achieve it. You know, I am so blatantly honest about, you know, being a sinner. It's unreal. You know what I mean? Like people will be like, oh, well, you know, you have some sin, and that's why God's not doing this. Or I'm like, you find me someone who doesn't have unrepentant sin, and I will find you a human being. You find me someone who doesn't have it at all. No, they have no unrepentant sin. I'm going to say you found me a liar. Because there's
maybe very, very young kids, maybe. But then they can't process the rest of it because cognitively they're not there.
But they're not even repenting their lies and stuff like that fully.
No, I said very, very young. So before language.
Oh, like before they can speak.
Yes.
Yes.
So maybe. So maybe there. But after that, no.
Are they repenting, peeing on their parents? Come on, no, just. They're selfish indulging for food. No,
but they don't have any choice.
We're being extremely ridiculous at this point. So, but you know, we are kind of making a point. We're trying to show people that there is a way to approach all this through the lens of Jesus. And you know, there will be some difference of opinion. I mean, you'll find some people who will use the same exact verse to mean different things. You know,
so you have to try to go back and see first, did it change over time when it got it translated multiple times?
Well,
you almost have to go back to original first place we can find it, how it was written, and then you have to do a bunch of study just to figure out, because times can change what some words mean.
Yes, and
which is a huge job,
right? And you have to be very, very careful if you're gonna be a really good person who wants to understand things fully, because you also have to filter past what your preacher tells you and what you're taught in Sunday school, because sometimes what you were taught was the simple answer and not the nuanced depth of what it really means. Because the stuff that's more challenging is very nuanced in the Bible. It means it's you have to not just look at that one verse or that one section, you have to compare that to the entire book, you know? So, because there's things that happened in the Old Testament that changed the way the New Testament is interpreted. You know?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lifetime's worth of learning there, at least.
There's a few lifetimes. If one of us can do it in a single lifetime, I'll be amazed, because I don't think it's possible. Because I keep finding new things when I go dig in. I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't think about that like that before, but now I'm thinking about that like that now. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot of stuff that the church won't put forward because it confuses people, right? Like the fact that God will use a sinner, the most unlikely of people, to do huge things, right? God will use a completely sinful, disastrous situation. You know what I mean? And these are things that God knew were going to happen before he created everything. So he knew, like, these things were going to come out the way that they came out. So he's still, you know.
But he gave us a choice within that. Even if he understood exactly how it was all going to play and what choices you were going to make.
The choices are there. The choices are there. It's not like he's making the choice for us. I mean, technically, he could, knowing that what we'll choose, he could lay out the scenario that we would choose, and he could guide us on what we would choose the way we are. I mean, technically, he could do that, and he may do that in some cases. I can't say either way. But I can, think about things that are, real obvious, in that scenario. It's like Jacob and Esau. You know what I mean? It's like God said, hey, you know what? It's going to be the younger one's going to, go. And so Jacob tricked his brother, lied to his father for the blessing, you know what I mean? And then became Israel. Literally, that was his name, and his sons were the 12 tribes. You know what I mean? It's like, what about David and Bathsheba, right? The son that came from that is Solomon, who built the temple. You know what I mean? It's like, here is, so it's like, these are examples to me that teach me that God is not like somebody who uses the goody two shoes. You got to be like a saint to be.
But I think it almost makes it more real, because everybody can identify with the person who walked a large path of sin and then tried to change their life.
Well, yes.
So I think that makes it more powerful.
It does make it powerful, but what gets into the stumbling blocks of people, they don't want to make those things real obvious in the church. I mean, I have waited for years to hear about the sermon that Solomon is the son of the David and Bathsheba, and then built the temple, like that being part of like the point of the sermon. I have yet to hear that sermon anywhere. You know what I mean? But what that communicates to me is that, it's not our ideas of what a good Christian should be, right? It's not necessarily the same way that God looks at it. It's not about our behavior, if we follow the rules. It's about where your heart is. You know what I mean? It's about the way that you approach things. Are you serving? You know what I mean? Are you, because it's like, if you look at the Bible, it's not about those who are super pious. It's about those who are super willing to be used by God.
I think that some of those rules, they're lines that are very serious. And then, in other words, I don't know that the sin of murder is the same as coveting your neighbor's wife. I don't know that they're quite as equally bad, because the consequences of murdering somebody are larger. So
I would think that...
I'm not saying either one's good.
Well, I don't know if those sins were like, sins of death. You know what I mean? They were just like the rules that were given at the time. And if you consider the era and what they were dealing with at that time, coveting someone's wife could probably lead to murder.
Oh, absolutely could lead to murder.
You know what I mean? It's like
it still could.
If someone forces my girl wrong, thinking about punching them. You know what I mean? I'm probably not going to, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it is definitely a crazy world out there, and I would simply say that we are blessed in this country, that our forefathers were brilliant in granting our rights, calling them, making them enumerated rights, but that those rights were granted by God, not by government.
And you know,
and that is one of the great blessings of our country.
The most brilliant thing about our Constitution is that it was a living document. So those
it
of
is
us,
difficult to change, but yes, it is.
So those of us who try to pigeonhole a different era, right, so that our opinions are reinforced, we're not doing ourselves or anybody we talk to justice. We have to actually evaluate the current times against the document, not like...
Yeah, I disagree with that.
I understand, but the problem is that the people that had opinions well in the time didn't have no idea of some of the things that would have occurred.
And that's why we have
future.
an amendment process to the Constitution. But I think that I'm much more of an original intent person. Mm-hmm. That it is difficult often, not as difficult as figuring it out as with Christianity and figuring out original intent.
I would say original intent has to be evaluated from situation to situation, because there's sometimes original intent makes total sense on the situation, and other times it is a disaster to approach a situation that way, because there are some things that you can pull completely valid arguments, but then when you got to think about what original intent is stopping from happening, that needs to happen in some cases, or it may be original intent is an excuse to not do something that's needed. You know what I mean?
But see, I think that if it is not defined in the Constitution, I believe it should fall to states or people's rights, and thus they should be handling it. For instance, I don't believe that the Constitution ever should have touched abortion. I think that should be a state's right.
Let me ask you this. So we live in a country where we have states, but some people live in one state and work in another. Let's say, Missouri and Kansas. Right?
Two bordering states. It doesn't matter which one.
People work across the border on that one like crazy, right? So if the states have different rules to certain on certain things, like it could create a problem for people who do commerce or live in both states.
But I think that is the choice we make when we give states that much power, rather than having the federal government be a top-down, make all the decisions. I think that's the price you pay. And for instance, I hate most of the policy that has happened during my lifetime, or at least my adult lifetime, in California. I could choose to move somewhere else. I've chosen to stay and fight. Now that's a choice, but I believe that the idea that voter ID just got banned in California.
Yeah, people ridiculous go a little over the, when they describe it, they go a little ridiculous.
But I could move.
Yeah.
Okay, so
your point, it wasn't when you say banned. It was chosen not to do it.
No,
they didn't say, okay, if you bring out your ID, you're going to jail.
No, they didn't say that, but they said it is illegal to ask for it, a poll worker to ask for it. So I don't think there's probably any real teeth in that, but nonetheless,
you're right. It is.
So the private individual that came up could show it.
I wouldn't say the word illegal, because for something to be illegal, which means that there would have to be legal consequences.
I haven't read the bill, so I don't know the answer to that, but I'm guessing.
So I would say that it wasn't a ban, it was just not endorsed. So you don't have to, if somebody asks for it, you don't have to give it. And if they, you know what I mean, if they do ask for it, you can turn them in as asking for it, and then they can get in trouble. That's my understanding of the situation.
I love what Huntington Beach's solution is. They're a charter city. They went their charter. Think of it as is the city's constitution. They don't agree with the state. There's currently a legal battle over this. They have said they took it to their people. They voted. Do you want voter ID? And overwhelmingly, the people of Huntington Beach, it's 200,000 people roughly, said, yes, we want it. And they had it this last election. Well, I think that's a case of...
In that particular community, they probably, it would probably make more sense than not, because I doubt there's a lot of people in that community who are legal voters that don't have identification. Whereas in this community, there's thousands of people that don't have an ID card that are legal voters.
I don't agree with you.
Because they exist.
Because those people are somehow able to access all kinds of help. You have to have some sort of ID if you want help.
So you're talking about some people that you're talking about another level lower, and those people do have ID because they have Medi-Cal and all that other kind of stuff. I'm talking about the people in between all that. There's a lot of people who live in this country, that were born in this country, that live in this state, that grew up in this state, that do not have an ID card or a driver's license.
I thoroughly believe they could get it because it's so easy. But so they have to live outside the system for that to be the case.
They can get it. No, they live in the system, but in a very, very, very low means era. They don't have the $14 to spend to get the ID. They don't have it. They don't have it from month to month. They're every single month, $14. That's like 3 meals for them. You know what I mean? For their family. You know, so it's not like
very few people. If we're talking of full families. Families are typically very transitional. They might move into homelessness. They typically get help and move out. We're talking about single individuals almost always.
So actually, I'm thinking about some actual people that I actually know that are actually in this situation that, you know, that express to me their situation with IDs and all that kind of stuff. They would say if
and do they have money for cigarettes?
No.
Or for drugs or alcohol?
No, they
because
don't.
a whole lot of them I met. But I think those are the exception.
Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is the ones that are the more obvious are the ones that have that are just, you know, drugged out or whatever, and they're just losers. I'm talking about the people that are working 3 jobs. They you know what I mean, they maybe they got a
Drew, I'm not buying it. If they can find 3 jobs, they have ID. You're telling me they found 3 employers that are not requiring them to have a social security number?
There are a lot of employers that don't require that in this era, especially in this area.
Outside of ag, I'm not aware of.
No, they're talking about people who are in ag and they're citizens, but they don't have a license or they've never had a driver's license because they don't drive, never driven, and it's even weirder now because people are like 18 before you can get a driver's license now, like they've moved it up to 18. So if you're like, you know, you don't get them when you're in high school anymore unless your parents get you, you know, that kind of stuff.
But you can get a basic ID for nothing, and people would pay for that.
So
I really think this is the exception. You might know a couple people. I truly would be willing to bet this is the exception.
I actually know a handful of them because of my interaction with the homeless and my interaction
and
with,
I've interviewed
with
a couple people that
and, you know what I mean. So I'm trying to say is like I'm just saying that these people do exist. You know what I mean?
I think they're very much the exception. I have interviewed Deborah Rush and talked about this, so breaking the chains. Mm-hmm. I've also
we had Deborah on the show, but my point.
She's my dad's next door neighbor. I know her fairly well.
So my point being that even though the number may be small, right, it would be constitutionally inappropriate to extradite them. You know what I mean?
Or if
Now, if
we
gave away ID cards for free, they would not have an excuse. And
in California, I'm shocked we don't. We give away everything else.
Well, and if they were able to access them without having to go wait in a long line, you know what I mean? So if you know, and then what's the story on this?
For $10, not 14, for $10, I could go to the local swap meet. I was at one of them today and have an ID made up. Wouldn't be legitimate, but it would look like it was legitimate.
Right. Well, that's probably not a good idea. I wouldn't suggest that.
No, I'm just telling you this is a fact.
Well, yeah, I believe it. There's all
I'm
kinds
at the
of people.
Ramate regularly because of what I do for a living.
That is a dangerous scenario in itself. We're not recommending.
No,
that.
we're definitely not.
But my point was that those people do exist, and for us to ignore the fact that they exist, even if it's just 1% or less of the community, it is enough to where that would be. Now, again, the fix to that would be to make sure that everybody has an ID card.
Okay, I'm okay with us paying for the people between the cracks, but what I want to point out is by allowing this situation, it is exceedingly easy to cheat. And a great example is somehow magically, if we looked at how many people voted for Republicans and Democrats in the last several elections, presidential, and suddenly in 2020, there was this huge spike. And then we get to 2024, just like, 7 days ago, and 15 million Democratic voters disappeared. I believe that a large part of that is not because people didn't vote. I think a lot of those were fake votes. Thus, I think that there should be ID, and so does about 70 to 80% of the population. I've looked at several surveys on this.
I would be curious about the fake vote thing, because I was reading some articles about that very thing, and they were using the number 20 million. But
okay, but now some numbers have come up out of the states, so it's closer to 15.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, when I was reading the article, the number they were using was 20, and there had been some investigations on where these votes were supposed to be and who they were, and the article was was pretty thorough, and they were saying that it was disenfranchised mostly. They obviously can't say everybody, but it was mostly disenfranchised voters.
Yeah, I read some stuff similar to that, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think
it was investigative journalism.
I also know that
I'm not saying
that in California there is significant cheating, and by the way, both sides cheat. I've interviewed multiple different groups and people about election integrity. There is a lot of cheating that happens, and it is empowered by us not having ID and by us doing a vote-by-mail system.
Again, my only point about the ID thing is for the people that don't have it. If we're going to put an ID stipulation, everybody should have.
That's fair.
An ID.
I'm okay with that part. I think they're very much the minority, and it wouldn't. For me, that's not enough of a reason when I thoroughly believe that the cheat factor is higher than that. It is cheaper if you and there have been some documented cases, to buy ballots at $100 a piece, basically buy votes, than it is to actually campaign. Now that's a flaw in our system.
Well,
that's not blaming either side.
Let's be real. This last election, there were groups that were on our team, supposedly, that were saying that we will buy your ballot. They were actually buying ballots. They were saying,
who?
Huh?
Who?
Well, obviously, I don't know them personally. I can't tell you who they were.
Can you name the group?
There was one that got brought up that they went by the name of Voters for Freedom, something like that.
I will look that one up.
There was these generic names. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, but what they were doing is they were actually buying ballots.
And that should be punishable. That should be a felony, regardless of size.
But these guys are all operating completely under the radar. You know what I mean? It's like they're like,
Yes, but if we had voter ID, this would take care of itself for the most part. One day or maybe 3 days to vote.
But voter ID doesn't matter when it comes from a mail-in ballot, because you don't put your ID on a mail-in ballot.
Exactly. I don't believe we should have mail-in ballots except as the exception.
Well, I would agree with you if we didn't have long lines for the poor and short lines for the rich, which we do have. Everywhere. The poorer your community, the longer your lines are. And that's everywhere in this country.
In this county, I would say generally you're right, but in this
country, everywhere I've seen in this country where there's long lines, it's a poor community. And the rich communities have really short lines.
Again, I'm not going to argue that point. I'm going to say in Fresno County that vote centers are determined by how many people vote in an area. And I think there were 17.
Well, California is not as guilty as other states in that particular thing. But there are areas, in LA is one, San Diego has another thing where like the poorer areas have these huge long lines. I imagine Oakland's a nightmare,
The last time I went to Oakland, I was at Merritt Park, wanting to go look at the little amusement park. So I parked and I was walking over there, minding my own business, just kind of enjoying the day. And a cop walks up to me and he says, "You don't belong here."
Yeah.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "No, you don't understand. You don't belong here. Let me walk you to your car."
Yeah,
I looked at him and I went, "Yes, sir."
Yeah, his opinion.
And he walked me right back to the car.
Mm-hmm.
So I never got to really look around that park,
right.
which is too bad.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have experienced Oakland, but I was told by a cop, "Hey, buddy, I'm trying to save your butt.
Yeah. So I am not saying that these things are verbatim. I'm just throwing these areas out because they're typically the depressed kind of community that would suffer from something like that. You know.
Well, when I hear the argument made, it's because of race, and I think that is totally specious.
No, it's not.
And I'm not saying you
because
did.
Of race. It's not because of race. It is social status. It is not race. It is
And
social status.
and if I listen to, and this is both politicians like Maxine Waters, and she makes it about race.
Of course she does. Of course she does, because it's easier to say.
If she said it was about social conditions, okay, there's an argument there. If they say it's about race, I think that in and of itself, the idea that somebody couldn't get ID because of their race is inherently racist.
It is, and you know, but when you start to throw the race card around, right, and racist, right, that is a whole separation of the past and present as far as the realities of it. However, people will try to incorporate modern racism with old school Southern racism, and they're not the same.
No, they're not the same.
You know what I mean? And so I try not to have a racist discussion, because the truth of the matter is they will treat a poor white boy the same as a poor black boy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, and sometimes worse. Sometimes worse. I know that I being a long-haired guy that grew up lower middle class, I have gotten in more trouble than what you would think that a racist community would be under trouble because of the long hair, because of the choice to have long hair.
Well, Christianity, while it might acknowledge that there are different races, it sees one. That hopefully are united under
God. If you are claiming to be a follower of Jesus and you have a racial bias, you are a liar.
Right, and you said that better than I did, but that's where I was headed.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That there is essentially one race, that's how we're viewed. The fact that when I see portraits of Jesus, he's generally a white man, who knows? Look, God could be any color he wants. Why is it up to me to decide that?
And you know what? And I can understand why some people get up in arms about it, but you know, there are a lot of discussions around all of that insanity, because there is a lot of, in that part of the world, at that particular time, there were a lot of cultures and a lot of races that intermixed for thousands of years. You know? For them to say that, oh, everybody looked like this, so Jesus had to look like this, is stupid.
It's a guess.
Because there were blonde
followed
hair,
by their bias.
There were blonde hair, blue-eyed Jews. There were very dark-colored, dark-haired Jews.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was a spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, there were even some Jews that we would, you know, look like Africans,
mm-hmm.
and they were Jews. You know, so
and we got to remember, Judah, that whole area, the Jews are the foundation of Christianity.
Well, some people would say that the 12 tribes of Israel covered the racial spectrum.
Maybe.
We have
I'm
no
not
evidence.
going to argue this.
We have no evidence to that. But some people said, I mean, think Esau, right? He was a furry red dude. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? His brother Jacob would not. You know what I mean? They were very different. They were twins. You know? So, you know, how things happened then and how things can happen now doesn't necessarily have to be the same. You know?
No, but I believe the human experience is something that we keep reliving. That there are universal themes.
Well, here's the thing. Humans are fundamentally flawed. We have a self-serving need, and we're arrogant by design, which is horrible. But that's why we need Jesus. Because if we're just going to count on ourselves, and we're just going to do our own thing, we are not doing ourselves or our fellow man justice. We need Jesus so that we have the ability to connect with God on another level, have a relationship with our Creator, so that we can be somebody, a vessel, a tool to be used by God. And if we approach our Christianity, we approach our life, if we approach these things self-serving, we are not following the teachings of Jesus. And that's pretty simple. Jesus said, if you want to lead, you must first serve. You got to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
That was a hard one for me sometimes. I've had some really great neighbors and some that really make it hard.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, though, look at it like this. Sometimes your neighbors tick you off, right? But how many times have you ticked yourself off?
I had the worst neighbor I ever had. Ended up being the greatest motivation that I ever had.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
I was in the process of buying a house. Mm-hmm. I was having trouble getting over the hump. She convinced me that I needed to work 80 hours a week because I could not live in that apartment complex any longer. Because every time I turned around, there was a new guy, and she had a 14-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son that she barely watched.
And it was none of your business. It was probably horrible. Yeah.
It was horrible, but at the same time, I think there's all of these opportunities that constantly happen. What do we make of them? That's part of what free will is. I took it and turned it into a positive, bought a house. Now I'm in a more stable place and I'm better able to do things that I think help my community because I've now got more time.
Free will is real simple. Life is a series of choices. Every single one of those choices is up to us to make our own choices. Whether it is an obvious choice or not so obvious choice. You know what I mean? The ones that are a little bit more confusing, we got to spend some time praying about, and hopefully we get enough time to where we can wait for an answer. But we don't make the right choice all the time. I know I haven't. I still don't sometimes.
I still definitely don't.
Anyway, Eric, we have run out of time. We've gone
not a problem.
We've gone a full hour here, which is cool. So you got the whole episode to yourself. But I do appreciate you coming and sitting.
It's always a good conversation.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And I love how we can just talk about things, and if we hit on a point we disagree, it's cool. We disagree, mm-hmm. and we want to understand the other person's point of view, and we're not like, oh, I don't care what you think. It's like
no, but the world would be a better place if we could hear each other because almost everybody has. I say almost everybody because I've met a couple idiots, and that's probably my bias. But more than 99% of the population has some legitimate perspectives.
I've met a lot of idiots. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I live in a world of simpletons. You know what I mean? I've had that breakdown before. But I'm not saying you're all stupid, just like some of you. Okay.
Yeah, but even stupid people very frequently have some real points and have some common sense.
Well, there's something that they're not stupid about.
Right. Because intelligence isn't a straight line. It's
and here's the thing. If we all knew our limits, right, what we were good at and what we weren't good at, then this world would be next to perfect. But
well, except we'd still have people in it. And so we'd still have our flaws, but it'd be way better.
I said next to perfect. Anyway, Eric, thank you for coming on, man.
Glad to.
Man, I really appreciate you, man, and I know that we didn't talk, a whole lot about, the details in the Bible too much, but, you are somebody who I know is rad for Christ, and you're definitely fired up for Jesus. And
absolutely.
We'd love to see that here. So God bless you, brother.
God bless.
Cool. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that the show kind of dug deep into a kind of specific set of topics, but hopefully you found it informative, you got something out of it, you were able to apply it to your life. I think that it may be benefiting you, some of you at least. Anyway, so if you enjoyed the show, I would love to know about it. And then I would like to take a moment to reach out to some people out there right now who are wondering about a relationship with Jesus Christ. You are probably, dealing with a whole lot of confusion, a lot of issues, that kind of stuff, but you're feeling this like pressure, this tug. Every time anybody talks about Jesus or talks about a relationship with their Creator, you're feeling it in here somewhere. Now, if that is you, you need to act on that. You shouldn't just keep letting that happen. You should be like, okay, this means something. I should investigate this. If you want to take that to the next level, all you got to do is just talk to Jesus, right? You got to say, Jesus, I need you. Come into my life and turn me into the person that you've designed me to be. You can say a lot more than that. You can say something different. But what it's important is that you engage with the Creator in a discussion. And you can just say what's on your heart and tell Him what you would like for your life. You can pray and say all these things. It's not a transaction. You don't say, God, I want this, and you get it. It doesn't work like that. But it does work as simple as having a relationship with God. You say, I want a relationship with you, and He will give you one. It is as simple as that. So I would encourage you to do that. And if you did do that while watching the show or another episode or watching this on rerun, I really want to hear about it. So we have a website. That's radforchrist.com. That's R-A-D, the number 4, Christ.com. And on there's a form called Got Saved. If you did that prayer today or whatever, you can go onto our website, fill out that form, and I can send you a Bible and a little gift to show you that we are super excited and happy for you that you decided to join the family of God. And, I hope that you would take the time to fill that out. Also, if you're on the website and you have a question about the show, about the Bible, about the people that work here, about me, about our guests, about your math homework, whatever it is, please let us know. We have a form for that called Ask a Question. Ask us the question. We would love to be able to answer that question for you. And also, we have a form for prayer requests. So if there's something in your life that you need prayer for, please let us know so that we can pray for you. Because you see, we are here to serve. And this is the most important part of all. And that's Jesus Christ loves you. And so do I. Thank you for watching Radical Christianity. We will see you next week.
And I'm not giving up, I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even if nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me.